How's it going, everyone? My name is Mischief, and today I have a rant for you.
Buckle up.
Take some notes.
I'm noticing a divide in Dungeons & Dragons players, and I'm using D&D as the example. This can actually be applied for pretty much any role-playing game, especially Pathfinder included. This divide I'm noticing is coming from extremely strong opinions on a number of preference issues when you're playing the game. Here's my belief. As long as it's your group, your table, you and your friends, you can play the game however you want. You can start with 5 million gold. You can play a 4th edition fighter in a 5th edition campaign. You can play as a freaking dragon. I don't care. As long as it's your table and you're having fun, cool. Because it's your group, your way of playing. No one else is there to enforce any other rules on you. However, this is not always the case. A lot of people have to go to public areas in order to play D&D. And a lot of times, this is where people first play D&D and get a first taste of the game. Sometimes, on Saturdays, I go over to a comic book store in my town, and I get to play at a public group, where I just sit down with a bunch of people I don't even know, and we just play out a normal D&D session. Everyone has to basically conform to a standard way of playing the game. And there's nothing wrong with that. Although, when you do get a bunch of people together who don't know each other, sometimes you get conflict. You get people who believe the game should be played one way over another, and tensions arise either in-game or out of game. Today I'm going to shed some light on these differences, and I'm going to use American politics to help relate my example. Note, for all you should care, I'm completely neutral, member of the Pink Princess Party, and we believe that starfish should have more rights than humans. Here are some issues that divide conservatives and liberals. For each issue, there are two sides. Neither party believes that murder should be legal, just like how no one in D&D really believes that one party member should be 10 levels higher than all the other party members. There's some pretty obvious ones that everyone agrees on. So I believe a similar list exists for D&D players. Let's get into it. I'm going to go over the list, and I'm going to go over what each side means. I'm going to give my personal critique on the issues, and these are my personal opinions. I encourage you to actually decide for yourself which side you fall on. In addition, try to be open-minded and see some new ways that you might want to try playing the game. Most of us will probably agree that the answer lies somewhere between the two issues, not necessarily one or the other. Here's the list, and don't take it as one party versus another party. These are all individual traits. I'm going to swap some around so you can see that you can have essentially any combination of these that you choose, although some tend to be aligned with others. So first we have combat versus roleplay. This is a pretty common one that's addressed in most Dungeon Master guides in most editions that I've seen. If you fall on the combat side, you think D&D should be about the combat and mostly filled with combat. Combat should be at every session. I would say that combat has become more and more integrated into the D&D rulebooks. I would say it peaked at 4th edition, where combat took 2 to 3 hours per fight. 5th edition took a step back and made combat a little simpler, so moves a little quicker, but there's still a lot to it. This one really just seems like your preference. If you like tactical combat that takes a while, then you're probably someone who enjoys that aspect of D&D more than the roleplay. If you're a role player, you think that D&D sessions should be primarily about the role-playing.
But Dad, I don't want to the dwarf!
Listen, boy. You know what? Your mother, she said the exact same thing when she met me.
This means out-of-combat interactions with other NPCs and characters and other players in-game, where you're speaking in voice, and you're doing things that your character would do and say, and you're trying to make impact in the game outside of just beating the crap out of everything you see. These are the people that enter the courtroom and try to negotiate with the king or queen, or who try to bribe the goblins instead of necessarily ambush them. I think it's a much more open-minded way to play the game, because combat's only one of thousands of choices you can do in any given situation. Plus, role-playing can move you through the game a lot quicker than combat can, so I believe it's a good thing to have in any D&D campaign. Next, we have allies or associates. If you fall on the allies side, then you believe that your D&D party is obligated to help each other and become one team towards a common goal. You think it is wrong for party members to try to hinder each other and harm each other, like stealing each other's stuff, or even attacking each other. You believe that if your party is together, you are all one unit and one team. I prefer to play with this ally mentality, although it can be a little hindering on the game when you're not allowed to make certain decisions, even if it's what your character would do. If one party member does something that my character is extremely morally obligated against, I'm probably going to turn on that party member, verbally or physically or something. But it is nice being able to play as a team versus the adventure, versus the dungeon master. That's an experience that I personally prefer. If you're on the associate side, it means that your party members are simply the other people sitting at the table. You have no obligation to them. It's all about what your character thinks and what they would actually do. You might spend the entire campaign not even friends with any of them because your character doesn't actually like them. but for reasons that the Dungeon Master helps integrate into the story, you're sticking with them, although you're not obligated to be for them or help them in any way. This is the ultimate free form of D&D where even your allies aren't exempt from your character's choices. You can do good or evil to them, it's total free will. Although if a player is playing a character that is notoriously just a dick, then this can get really old really quickly. That can take away the fun from other party members, even if you're enjoying being an associate. A lot of times I even see whole parties devolve because none of them are willing to step up, be the bigger person, and, unite everybody. Okay, rulebook versus game master. If you fall on the rulebook side, you believe that the rulebook comes before the dungeon master, and this is a very valid point. Whatever edition you're playing, the rulebook is what gets all of you on the same page as far as the game you're playing. It tells you what skills are being used in the campaign. It tells you how combat works. In addition, it's the one thing that separates the game from just sitting around a campfire telling a story to each other. If you have rules, then you have a game. I believe that too much focus on the rules can take away from the freedom aspect that D&D is capable of. But it's important not to get too far away to the point where you're playing like a hybrid of 5 different role-playing games and the rules are changing every session. Without the rulebook, it can leave players frustrated when they try to take a risk and they believe they know the rules for what the risk will entail, but then the rules just change on them without warning. And that can be pretty frustrating. If you're on the Game Master side, you believe the Game Master has authority over the rules, and they can make changes as they see fit. I think this very heavily depends on who the Dungeon Master is and if their decisions are fair. If you have a Dungeon Master who has a power complex and wants to just make things go their way, it can be a little bit abusive, but certain game masters, I've seen them break the rules a lot, and I've been happy with every decision. Not because it helped me, but because it made the game more fun, more appealing to the whole group. I think especially you can go with this method when it's a private group and it's just you and your friends, and you sort of have a chemistry with the Dungeon Master. But in a public game, it can be a little awkward when the Game Master decides, I'm going to just trump that rule that you were going to use. Party rules versus freeform party. If you believe in party rules, you believe that a party of adventurers should be well balanced with one of every general type of class, and they should be well stocked and prepared and build their characters around each other so that they can take on harder encounters. This is a more classic way to play D&D. In older editions, if you didn't have a healer, someone who could heal in the party, you would all die pretty quickly. If you didn't have a tank, you would die pretty quickly. If you didn't have a wizard at high levels, it would be hard to get anywhere. D&D 5th edition has taken a deliberate turn away from having party roles so that people can play whatever they want and still be essentially balanced as a team. However, it's still entirely a preference thing. I still believe that even in 5th edition, a well-balanced party is better than a party of 6 warlocks. It provides more flexibility and versatility in different situations, so it's really up to you. How much do you want to succeed and overcome the Dungeon Master's challenges? It could also depend on the Dungeon Master. If you're playing in a hard level campaign where every encounter is at the hard or extreme level, you might want a balanced party. You might want to have a healer and a tank. If you believe in the freeform party, then that means every person can play whatever class and race they want, regardless of what other players are playing. In this mode, you might end up with a lot of a certain type of role or class, and none or very few of a certain other type. This allows a lot of freedom, particularly for people who like a certain type of class but might get forced to play a different role if their class was already taken. It can be kind of crappy when you get forced to play a role you don't want to play. This opinion might not be popular, but it reminds me of games like League of Legends and Overwatch, where when you get into the lobby in the queue, everybody insta-locks the fun roles, the casters and the damage dealers. And then people who are stuck on the support roles usually don't want to do it. And so either they have to pick support or the party will fail. So really depending on the Dungeon Master you're playing with and the campaign you're playing in, you can probably get away with a freeform party in 5th edition. If it is too hard and your party does need a healer, the problem usually corrects itself because people will die and then they have to make new characters. This one's for Game Masters, and it's pre-written adventure versus improvised adventure. If you're on the pre-written side, you believe that adventures should be made fully beforehand, start to finish, have every encounter planned, or versatile encounters planned already before the adventure begins. We wouldn't have famous villains like Count Strand von Zarovich without these kind of pre-made modules. I'm not this type of dungeon master, but I can imagine that it's really helpful for some people to have it written out ahead of time. The issue I see with pre-written adventures is that the ending is predetermined, and if you know that ahead of time, for a player, it always makes me feel like I've lost a lot of the free will and free choice that comes from playing D&D. However, it usually does mean that every point is pretty concise and well made, And a lot of times you're willing to follow the story to its conclusion. You're not trying to run off and pillage a village or something like that. If you're for improvised adventures, that means that you do not plan before the adventure comes about. You might plan some things, but instead you're relying on moving the story around based on what the players do and what the non-player characters do. This can be really fun, but it can also go poorly when it simply takes a sideways turn the dungeon master wasn't expecting, and the adventure becomes subpar because something wasn't planned, and players end up with just half-assed encounters that don't really challenge or don't really have anything unique to offer. I do want to say that there is a nice middle ground here where you can pre-write every session's adventure and then improvise week by week. That way it's not like the next 10 sessions are planned out. You know, players come in and they have something already planned for them, and then based on whatever happened, they can modify the story as they see fit every week. Okay, deadly versus forgiving. This one involves player deaths. If you are on the deadly side, then you believe that death should be a common theme in campaigns and it's okay for characters to die. I mean, I see a pro and con in this. The pro is that players will be forced to take the game a little more seriously and actually try. If a character never feels in danger, it can be easy for them to feel invincible. Death keeps players on their toes and thinking harder. However, if you're in a campaign and people have grown attached to their characters, it can really suck losing a character. One time in a Star Wars campaign, I lost a character I'd been playing for about 20 sessions. I was actually really pissed. I had to go home and cool off and come back next week kind of refreshed. Sometimes death is a good thing. It can definitely allow players who have kind of grown tired of a character to sort of recycle and bring in someone new. And honestly, have you ever seen a really, really good movie where an important character didn't die? I mean, when a character dies, you feel for them. And a lot of times it can inspire the other party members around you to rally into a certain direction, to avenge the character's death or do something that they believed was like morally just to their character. The other side is the forgiving aspect. Even if players come close to death, they can often be resurrected, brought back, and the encounters might be forgiving. Even if they're challenging, they never necessarily end in a party member death. This method can work. It can have lighter punishment where maybe, if you're resurrected, you lose a level or you'll lose an item or something like that. Smaller consequences that don't involve death, because death is so absolute and final. If your character dies, you have to make a whole new one and now you're playing an entirely different character. Non-death forgiving consequences let players keep their characters and still be able to feel a little bit of punishment, a little slap on the wrist when they do something stupid or fail at a task. Again, the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle. Okay, serious versus silly. If you're on the serious side, then you come to the table ready to play a competitive game that you might lose. You're here in character, you're trying your hardest, and you take the game seriously. Whatever happens, you don't want to fail. You're trying to avoid negative consequences. This is largely a preference thing because some people don't like being in that serious mode all evening, But when players get really into it and the entire party's involved, those have been some of the greatest moments I've ever experienced in D&D, where everyone's involved, we're all in the same world, imagining the same thing, and we're all trying really hard at it. No one's connected halfway or half-assing it. If you're on the silly side, then you believe that when you sit down, the game is a game, and you can sort of sift in and out of reality, playing as you please, and oftentimes making decisions that might be uncharacteristic, foolish on purpose, or just ridiculous. I have also experienced moments where this was one of the greatest things that ever happened in a game, where just something totally ridiculous happens because a person made a stupid decision, and everyone was just laughing the entire evening about it. That also has a lot of merit to it, and that is also a way people play the game and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. One issue I have seen with silly behavior, though, because you're treating it like just another game, I often found no reason why you couldn't just skip playing D&D for the evening and go play Super Smash Bros. Or a board game instead. It becomes just another game, and there's no commitment really involved in the whole thing. For my final one, I'm going to argue for one of the sides. It's something that I believe is sort of wrong to the game if you're on one side. There's imitation versus original. If you're on the imitation side of the game, you believe that there is one particular best way to play D&D. And maybe this isn't like you're on one side or the other. If you're an imitation player, it might mean that your views on the different things you believe are extreme and unmoving. For whatever reason, you think that a way that you've been playing or the way you think the game should be played is the best way, and other people should conform to your method. These are the people that come to public tables with a mindset, and when a new player tries to do something, they say, no, don't do that, do this instead, and they start playing other people's characters for them. Or they get into arguments with the dungeon master because the dungeon master tried to fudge a rule or tried to do something that they didn't like. But the other side is kind of an anarchy thing, and that's the original D&D. It means that you are absolutely okay with original interpretations of Dungeons and Dragons. It means that you think there's no certain way it has to be played and that it is open to interpretation. And I absolutely fall on this side. I think people should be open-minded in playing Dungeons and Dragons, and here's why. When you play League of Legends or Overwatch, it's a competitive game. You can have a best build or a best strategy or a best team comp because it's two teams going at each other and there's a definitive winner and people rise to the top of the leaderboards based on playing the game more effectively than others. This is not the case for Dungeons and Dragons. It's not competitive. If you're having fun with your friends, whether you beat the adventure or you get a total party kill, as long as you're enjoying the game, you're doing it right. Thousands of groups might be able to defeat the Tomb of Horrors, but only my group gets to experience the little nuances and moments of wacky decisions and crazy creative things that we've all made up together. Those little moments are what we laugh about for months and months after the sessions are over. When you get every individual table at every individual basement or garage or home or comic book store, you get individual opinions of the game, individual perspectives, and everyone gets to build a unique session that time. Every single session is unique to that group based on what you guys do. So I believe in originality. I believe in letting people make decisions that might be unorthodox and that might take the game in a totally new direction. Because otherwise you're just mimicking what others have done in the past. If I can leave you with one thought today, it's to think of D&D groups like dating partners. There are unfortunately some people I dislike playing with. All of us have those people. And I've caught myself countless times lashing out at them or saying that they should be playing the game a different way than they are. If I went on a date with someone and didn't like them, I just wouldn't go on a second date. Easy as that. But I wouldn't get upset at them on the date just for being themselves. I would finish out the date respectfully, and then I would part ways. The hard reality is that when you impose your views on someone, you usually take the fun away from them. Half the fun is being able to make your own choices instead of having someone else make them for you. At least it is for me, and I know a lot of other people share that view. So try to game with people you know you're going to agree with. And if you do find yourself at a table with people who share completely different views from you, try to be open-minded and respectful. Respect other players, especially the new players who are coming in and exploring the game on their own. It's a game like no other. So don't judge that player who did a weird build and you know they could be more effective in combat if they did a build your way. And let that new player try the weird strategy they want to try out, just to see how it goes. Let's quit shitting on clerics. If they don't take any healing spells, they're not selfish. Just let them play a DPS cleric. It's okay. And if they do take a bunch of healing spells, don't treat them like they're oppressed heal bots. It's a fun role to be support. Let the team protect you, run around trying to survive and trying to keep your allies up while they do the fighting. It's just as fun. I don't see the issue. I'll probably rant about the heal bot thing another time. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting me, and I hope your next session is freaking awesome. Game on.